If you make a scene again, they'll think you like it. And then I won't be able to protect you anymore. That's what my mother whispered in my ear as she locked the door from the inside, as if protecting me was that, as if letting it happen was a mother's love. My name is Wilma Grace. I'm 76 years old. I was born and raised in Springfield, Missouri. And if you're here to hear a beautiful story, you can stop right here, because what I've been through can't be told over afternoon tea. But I'm alive, and today I speak. The first time I heard my mother say that, I was still in diapers. I remember it well, because it was the first time I understood that the pain at home was no accident. It was routine. It was the rule. I had knocked over a plate out of nervousness. My father no longer lived with us. He had left when I was too young to remember why. They said he had been rude, crude, a drunk. But compared to what was left after he left, I would trade any day with him for just one night with those who stayed. My mother became the boss of the house. She commanded, yelled, judged, and she turned a blind eye to everything that happened. Or worse, she let it happen. I had 3 brothers, all older than me. The oldest, Thomas, was old enough to work. The others, Mark and Bobby, were still in school, but inside that house, age didn't matter, power did, and I had none. At first it was just a nuisance. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing one of them standing at my bedroom door. Sometimes it was Mark, sometimes Bobby. In the dark, I could only see their silhouettes, but I could feel it, the gaze, the presence. I would turn to the corner and pretend to go back to sleep, because I thought that if I didn't look, maybe it wasn't real. Then came the touching, hidden on the sofa, the way Thomas would call me to sit on his lap when no one was looking. The first time he took me to the basement of the house, I didn't even know what to think. He said he was going to show me a box of old toys. My mom was doing laundry in the backyard. I went, right? Kids do that. And when he locked the door, I realized it had nothing to do with toys. It didn't happen all at once. They knew how to take it slow. They knew how to break me down little by little, first with their hands, then with their whole bodies. And there was always an excuse. There was always a lie. And when I tried to tell my mom, she would turn around and say with the coldest tone in the world, "You must have done something. Don't poke the boys," as if I were guilty of breathing. Little by little, I faded away. Inside. At school, I was the quiet girl who didn't participate in anything. The teachers even asked if I was okay. I said yes, because what was I going to say? That at home, after dinner, my brothers lined up to come into my room? That my mother left the TV on loud so she wouldn't hear anything? No one would believe me. And I also thought that no one cared. There was one day of the week that was the worst. Friday. Friday was the day my mother went out to play bingo at the church. She would get dressed up, put on perfume, and say she was going to have some fun. And she left me with them. It was as if she had handed over the key to my cell. Sometimes she even said, "Behave yourself, Wilma. Don't embarrass me." Being embarrassed meant screaming. Being embarrassed meant resisting. Once I tried to run. I ran out the back door with Bobby chasing me. I ran to the neighbor's fence. I knocked, I screamed, but no one opened the door. And when he pulled me back by the arm, I swear I thought I was going to die. And then came the phrase, that phrase, from my mother's mouth, the phrase that never left my head. "If you open your mouth one more time, I'll hold you down myself so they can do it right." And she wasn't drunk. She wasn't angry. She was calm. Her eyes were dry and cold, as if it were just another chore, as if I were just another object in the house that was too much trouble. After that, I stopped running away. I became even quieter. I hid inside myself. I answered only when necessary. I ate the bare minimum, and I learned to predict. I knew that when Thomas spent a lot of time looking out the window, it was because something was going to happen. When Mark got nervous, I was the one who paid the price. When Bobby couldn't sleep, he would show up in my room. I knew everything, like someone who memorizes the routine of their own pain, and no one saw it, or pretended not to see it. There was a teacher who once called me after class. She looked at me with that look of someone who knows too much and said, "If you want to talk, I'm here." I wanted to. I wanted to with all my strength, but I froze. I just nodded and walked away, because inside part of me still thought that maybe it was normal. Maybe it was like that in every home, but it wasn't. I knew it wasn't, and yet it continued. On the outside, I was growing up, but on the inside, I was just withering away, a vase without water, a body that breathed out of obligation because stopping was cowardly, and I wanted to be strong. I wanted someone to look at me one day and say, "You survived." But at that time, surviving meant just waking up the next day. And so day after day, the child Wilma faded away. In her place, only a shadow remained, silent, bent over, waiting for something to change, for someone to appear, for God to see. And if you're still here with Grandma, don't forget to leave your like below, my dear. After that night when my mother said that, something inside me went out. It wasn't like a scream or an explosion. It was more like a candle that goes out without wind. It just goes out. And when it goes out, you can't even see yourself anymore. That's how I felt. A body walking around the house, a face that no one really saw. Waking up became a heavy task. I only opened my eyes because I knew that if I took too long, my mother would come and bang on the foot of the bed. And it wasn't to take me to school. It was to remind me that I wasn't the master of my own time. My routine was timed by their presence. If one woke up first, I would already be shaking, because depending on their mood, that day could be hell or just limbo. Hell was when they wanted to play boss. Limbo was when they ignored me. Neither was good, just different kinds of pain. At school, my teacher, Mrs. Lambert, still looked at me with a kind of sadness that bothered me. Sometimes she would put her hand on my shoulder without saying anything, and I pretended not to feel it, because if I let myself feel it, I would break down, and breaking down there in front of everyone was not an option. What happened at home was enough. I couldn't give anyone else a reason to comment. I was 8 years old when I realized they weren't going to stop, that it wasn't a phase, it wasn't boy stuff. It was something planted, watered, authorized. Every time my mother left the house and left me there, she signed with her soul that I was theirs, and they knew it. They used it. Thomas now waited for the moment when the house fell silent. He would walk through the living room, ask ironically if I was behaving, and when the bedroom door closed, he didn't need to say anything else. I knew. I learned not to look at his face, not to speak, because when I spoke, once, just once, he silenced me with his hand. After that, I didn't try again. Mark was worse in another way, more calculating. He would come when no one expected it. Sometimes I was in the kitchen, washing the glasses, and he would come up behind me and say he just wanted to talk. But I knew, I always knew, and when I ran away from his touch, he would laugh and say I was weird. He called me ungrateful. Then his anger grew, and then it hurt more. Bobby, on the other hand, he was the youngest, but the cruelest. He did everything laughing, as if it were a joke, as if it were a game. He would hold me by the arm and say that if I didn't cooperate, he would tell my mother that I was offering myself. He said that women who cry are women who like it. They just don't want to admit it. It made me sick, but it was either that or a beating. I remember one afternoon when it rained heavily and the power went out. My mother had gone out to sew clothes at a neighbor's house. Thomas was sitting in the living room, Bobby was lying on the couch, and Mark was looking out the window. I cowered in the corner of the kitchen, pretending to clean the floor. When the rain got heavier, Mark said, "It's nighttime already, and she's still standing there. She thinks she's so cool." It wasn't long before the footsteps began. No one saw, no one knew, but that afternoon, I wished I could disappear forever. I asked God. I asked hard, but he didn't come. After that day, something in my body began to change. I had nightmares every night. I woke up sweating, shaking. I started to lose weight. My teacher called my mother to talk, saying that I looked sick, sad. My mother laughed dryly and said it was just a lazy girl thing. No one insisted, because no one really cared. There were days when I didn't know if it was really happening or if I was going crazy. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize my face anymore. My eyes were sunken. My lips were bruised. My skin was covered in marks that I said were from falling down the stairs, from tripping. No one questioned it. Bobby started calling me girlfriend. He said it in front of his mother, and she laughed. I looked at her, hoping for a shred of humanity, but all I saw was indifference. She said, "Let the boys be happy. You're too sensitive." and she went back to sewing, as if nothing was happening, as if I were just an inconvenient presence. Once I tried to write down what was happening in a notebook, a letter with no name, no address. I just wanted to get it out. But Mark found it. He tore it up, laughed, and pushed me against the wall. He said that next time he would show it to everyone, that he would say I was making it up, that I was a liar, that I had a crush on my brothers. That destroyed me. I never picked up a pencil to try again. At 9 years old, I no longer cried. Not at the time, not afterwards, because I realized that crying only made them like it more. It seemed that the more I resisted, the more they enjoyed it. So I stopped. I turned to stone, and inside me, everything hardened. My mother started to ignore me completely. She only spoke to me to tell me to do my chores. She said I was becoming a cold slut, that girls who don't smile don't get married. And I thought, if marriage is what she has, I don't want to smile ever again. One night I woke up with Bobby at the foot of my bed. He said he just wanted to lie down for a little while. I pretended to be asleep. He slowly pulled back the blanket, and I just remember praying silently, asking him to give up. I think God heard me that time, because he stopped, but it was only that one night. I started marking the days when nothing happened on the closet, just chalk marks, hidden behind the clothes. It was my way of counting that I was still alive. When I got to 4 marks in a row, I thought I was dreaming, but on the 5th day, it all came back, and I erased everything in anger. My neighbor across the street, Mrs. Joan, saw me once with a bruised arm. She asked what happened. I said I fell off my bike, even though I didn't have one. She frowned. She said if I needed anything, I should just knock on her door, but she didn't mean it. She never asked again. I started to believe that the whole world was the same, that everyone was like that, and that if I wanted to move on, I would have to accept it. But deep down, part of me still wanted to scream. I just didn't know how, or to whom. It was around that time that I started dreaming about my father's house. I barely remembered his face, but I dreamed that he would come, open the door, and take me away from there. But when I woke up, the door was closed, and the footsteps in the hallway, coming toward my room, reminded me that the dream was still just that, a dream. The dreams started to turn into nightmares, not ones about monsters or shadows. They were different. I saw my mother locking the door from the inside, smiling, while the 3 of them sat at the table as if they were having dinner. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey me. I woke up with a dry throat, my pillow damp with sweat. Sometimes I didn't even know if it was sweat. Sometimes what dripped was just that liquid sadness that my body could no longer hide. At school, no one asked anymore. Mrs. Lambert still looked at me from time to time, but it seemed she had grown tired of insisting. I became a piece of furniture in the classroom. I was there, taking up space but without a presence. The other girls braided their hair, exchanged notes, laughed at anything. I just watched, and when they tried to include me, I gave them that smile I had learned to force early on, the one that doesn't reach the eyes. There were days when my head was so full that I forgot the way home. I walked slowly, pretending I wanted to see the street, but it was just fear. Fear of going back to that place where everything hurt. Sometimes I would sit on the school steps and wait for the world to pass by. No one noticed, as usual. At age 10, I started to feel constantly nauseous. At first, I thought it was anxiety or hunger. My mother said I was just being dramatic. "This girl wants attention," she would say loudly as she scrubbed the kitchen floor. Bobby would listen and laugh. Thomas would comment to Mark that maybe I was going crazy. They talked as if I was some kind of weird creature in the house. And in a way, I was. I wasn't one of them. I never wanted to be. One day, I woke up with a stain on the sheet. I ran to the bathroom, thinking I was going to die. It was blood. I screamed inside. I thought my body was giving up. My mother came in, looked bored, and said, "Now you're going to have to learn what it really means to be a woman." And she left. She didn't explain anything to me. She didn't ask if I was in pain. She just threw an old cloth on the floor and told me to get by. That left a mark, not the blood, but the absence of everything, of a care, of explanation, of affection. That's when I understood no one was going to catch me if I fell. I was on my own. Thomas started looking at me differently. as if that mark on my flesh authorized even more visits to my room. He said that now I was real, and every time he said that, I felt the urge to scream, suffocate in my throat. But no sound came out, and if it did, who would hear? Bobby kept laughing, as always. Now he called me my little woman, and when I tried to leave before he got close, he said I was ungrateful, that no one else would want a girl like me. Mark started to get colder. He said less. He did more. He came and went as if I were a place, not a person. There was one Sunday when I thought I would be able to escape. I hid in the closet with a small bag and 2 pieces of bread. I waited for them to fall asleep, but the noise of the hinge gave me away. My mother entered the room with her eyes narrowed. She didn't scream. She just pulled me by the arm, took me to the kitchen, and whispered in my ear, "If you disappear, I'll tell the whole town what you are. They'll call you worse than a slut. You'll be stoned, even by the neighbors." And I believed her. From that day on, I started talking even less. I ate little. I slept as much as necessary. I stopped existing in my free time. My body became thin, fragile. People looked at me on the street and said I looked like a shadow. One neighbor commented that I must have worms. Another said it was adolescence. No one considered the obvious, because no one wanted to know. It was easier to call me weird than to ask me why. At 11, I started avoiding mirrors. Every time I saw my face, I remembered that it was just like my mother's. The same deep-set eyes, the same drooping mouth. But what hurt the most was knowing that she saw me as a reflection too, and she hated me for it. One morning, Bobby broke a plate and blamed me. He said I accidentally knocked it over. My mother, without batting an eye, grabbed a wooden spoon and made me kneel on the kitchen floor. As she beat me on the back, she said, "A troublesome daughter learns by being beaten." Bobby laughed. Thomas didn't even look. Mark smoked in the backyard. And I, crouched there, just thought that one day it would all end, or I would end. After that day, I started hiding in the bedroom closet. It was cramped, but no one went in there. Sometimes I slept sitting up, with my knees up to my chin. There I cried. There I was still a child. There, no one touched me. It was inside that closet that I heard my mother talking to the neighbor one night. She said that my daughter is becoming strange. She seems to have no soul. The neighbor suggested praying. My mother replied that only a miracle would help, and I understood that she never wanted to understand me or save me. When the church organized a retreat for girls my age, I thought it might be a chance to escape for a few days. I asked to go. I insisted. She let me, but only because she would be able to keep the house clean without me around. It was 3 days. 3 days that I breathed without fear, that I really slept, that I walked without looking around. When I came back, Thomas said, "You're different, but don't worry, we'll fix that." And they did. That night, all 3 of them came into my room, one at a time, and when it was over, my mother appeared at the door, said that everything was fine now, and turned off the light. That's when I realized there was no easy way out, that no one was going to take me by the hand, that the world was deaf to those who spoke softly, and I only knew how to speak softly. Time passed, and I no longer knew how old I was inside. My body might have said 11, 12, but my soul was already too old to play, to dream, to hope for anything good. The days became copies of each other, and I only existed in the interval between one locked door and another. There were times when I thought my mother really wanted me to disappear, but without leaving a trace, without drawing attention, that I would evaporate, like boiling water vapor, the kind that no one notices when it disappears. In the neighborhood, everyone still thought our house was normal. Sometimes Mrs. Joan would praise my mother for keeping the boys so well behaved, and I would hear that and feel my stomach churn. What kind of world is this where people like them are called well behaved? But no one sees anything, right? Or they pretend not to see, which is almost worse. The kitchen became my daytime hiding place. I would stay there, pretending to clean, rolling up rags, rubbing soap where it was already clean, anything to avoid being in my room, because my room was their territory. Every corner of that house smelled of them, of what they did, of what they said, of what they took from me. I preferred to sleep leaning against the wall in the hallway when I could, and sometimes I even slept standing up with my forehead against the tile. better there than in the bed that had become a trench. My mother didn't even look me in the eye anymore. It was as if I had ceased to be human. I was useful to her because I cleaned everything, did what she told me to do, never talked back. But other than that, I was a burden. I think she was angry at what I reminded her of. Maybe the past, what she herself had swallowed in silence. Or maybe she just really hated me. Some people hate even their own shadow. One afternoon, I heard her talking to Thomas on the porch. I was ironing clothes in the kitchen, but the window was open. She said, "That girl is becoming a woman. If she doesn't get married soon, she'll end up ruining the house." And he replied, "No one will want her, Mom. She's already one of us." It was said with the calmness of someone commenting on the weather. I held back so I wouldn't throw up. And then I wondered, do they talk like that to each other? Do they know what they're doing? Are they proud? At school, my grades started to drop. I couldn't concentrate on anything anymore. My mind was elsewhere. I made mistakes when writing and only read a half of what I was supposed to. Mrs. Lambert called my mother again. She came back saying that the teacher was meddling too much and that she would deal with it her way. The next day, she made me kneel in the cornfield behind the house. She said that stupid girls were only good for cleaning floors, and I had been cleaning for a long time. It was during this period that Mark started bringing friends over. I would hide when I heard different voices, but one night he called me into the living room. He said he wanted to introduce me. He pointed at me as if I were an object. "This is Wilma, my little sister. Pretty, isn't she?" The two boys laughed. One of them said something I didn't understand at the time, but the tone, I understood the tone. It was the same as always. That malice disguised as a joke, the kind of thing that makes your blood run cold without even knowing why. After that, I started locking the bathroom door even to brush my teeth. I only felt alive when I was alone, and even then, only for a few moments. My body started to hurt for no reason. Pain in my back, neck, hips. I said it was fatigue, but I knew it was something else. It was everything I was keeping inside, because what doesn't come out of your mouth rots inside. Sometimes, when the house was empty, I would open the bedroom window and stare out at the street. I thought about jumping, not to die, but to run far away, where no one knew me, where I didn't have to answer for that family's surname. But I knew that alone, a girl that size wouldn't get far, and fear always spoke louder. I started to develop a strange habit, counting their footsteps around the house. I knew who it was just by the sound. Thomas dragged his boots a little. Bobby walked fast, anxiously. Mark walked quietly, like a shadow. When I heard one of them approaching, my body froze, and I stopped breathing. I didn't even have to think anymore. Fear did the work automatically. At 12, my face changed. My breasts began to grow. My body became more visible, and that became a problem. One of Bobby's classmates passed by the house and saw me cleaning the porch. Days later, he left a note on the gate. It said I was too pretty to be hidden. My mother found it, and instead of worrying, she hit me. She said I was provoking him, that only slutty girls got that kind of note. She tore up the paper and locked me in my room for 3 days straight. During those 3 days, Thomas came in twice, Bobby once, and Mark stood at the door doing nothing, just watching. That scared me even more, because his silence was different. It was the silence of someone who thinks things through, and I knew that one day he would act too. The only thing that kept me alive was a small memory. One Sunday, many years ago, when my father took me to the park. I must have been about 4 years old. He put me on his shoulders and said I was his star. That stayed in my memory. Just one sentence, but it was the only time anyone had ever called me something beautiful, and I clung to that, because when everything went dark, I needed to remember that at some point someone had looked at me as a person, even if only for a short time, even if that person disappeared afterwards. When I turned 13, home was no longer a place. It was a prison with polite walls, antique furniture, and fake smiles when we had visitors. On the outside, everything went on as if nothing was out of the ordinary, but inside, every room had a piece of what I had lost. My body no longer felt like mine, and my head was tired even on days when I didn't leave the house. Sometimes I would sit for hours on the back steps, staring at the ground, trying to remember what it was like to breathe without weight, Thomas got a steady job at a car repair shop in the poorest part of town. That should have been good news, right? Less time at home, less chance of something happening. But it was the opposite. He came home dirtier, rougher, more tired, and when he arrived, he took it all out on us. I tried to get away, but my mother said he had to relax in his own way, and if he thought I was frowning, one look was enough to drag me by the arm to my room, and she continued watching television, as if she were listening to a soap opera. Mark started going out more with his friends, but that didn't give me any relief. It terrified me, because now he came home drunk, and when he was drunk, he lost all restraint. One night, he showed up smelling of beer, stumbling over the furniture, laughing to himself. He slowly opened my bedroom door and stood there, just staring at me from the corner. He said I was growing up well, better than expected. I curled up in bed, not even breathing. He stood there for a while. Then he closed the door without coming in. But that was worse than if he had come in, because knowing it could happen at any moment was daily torture. Bobby was the same as always. He didn't change his tone, he didn't hide it. Sometimes he would call me over to watch TV with him and try to get close to me. If I refused, he would come up with those disgusting phrases. "It's been so long, Wilma. Are you stuck up now?" I would get up and leave, and he would laugh, as if I were just an old joke he was tired of telling, but liked to repeat to remember the taste. Little by little, I started having thoughts that made me afraid of myself. I thought about setting the house on fire while everyone was asleep. I thought about disappearing for good, going into the river and never coming back. But at the same time, there was still a tiny thread inside me that wanted to survive, and it was that thread that I held on to every day. I started writing again, in secret, but this time I wrote on pieces of bread wrappers, folded them, and hid them in a hole behind the closet. I didn't write names or dates, just feelings. I wrote so I wouldn't explode. It was my only way to speak out loud without anyone hearing. And it was in those words that I began to realize that maybe I wasn't crazy, that it was all really wrong, that I wasn't to blame, no matter how much they said I was. It was at this stage that Mrs. Lambert called me after class for the last time. She looked at me with eyes full of unspoken words. She held my hand tightly and asked softly, "Is something going on at home, Wilma?" It hit me like a bolt of lightning. For a second, I almost told her. My throat trembled, my eyes filled with tears, but I stopped myself. I just shook my head, and she let out a heavy sigh, as if she knew she had missed a chance. She didn't insist. She just said, "If you ever change your mind, I'm here." I left feeling even emptier, because realizing that someone could have done something and didn't hurt almost as much as what they did to me. The difference is that this pain has a name and a face. I started dreaming about running away again, but this time I wanted to plan it right. I thought about going to my father's house. I didn't know if he was still alive, where he lived exactly, but I remembered a corner, a tree, the smell of car oil. It wasn't much, but it was more than I had there. I spent days trying to remember the name of the street. One day at the market, I heard a lady talking about a neighborhood with the same name. I stored it in my memory, and there a plan was born. But to escape, I needed money, and that was what I lacked most. So I started hiding coins from my purchases. When my mother sent me to buy bread or soap, I would ask for the bill, pay, and hide the change in an old sock at the bottom of the drawer. It wasn't much, but every coin was a step away. At home, nothing changed. Everything followed the same damn routine. I already knew when they were going to knock on the door, the sound of their footsteps, their rapid breathing. I knew when my mother was going to leave and how long she would be gone. It was like living in a play where the script was the same every day. Only the intensity changed. One Sunday, I heard my mother say to a neighbor, "This girl is going to ruin the family. She's becoming full of secrets." The neighbor said it was just a phase, that all girls are like that. They laughed, and I understood that even if I screamed, no one would listen, because they don't want to hear. They want to keep up appearances. That week, luck almost turned against me. Bobby came into my room and started rummaging through the drawers. He said he was looking for a book, but he knew. He knew there was something there. When he got close to the drawer where I hid the money, my heart froze. But for some reason, he stopped at the top one. He found an old notebook and left. I only breathed again when I heard the door slam. After that, I buried the coins in the backyard inside an empty cream jar. Every night I would go there, bend down, and bury another one. The earth became my ally. Fear became my routine. And so it was, with each coin, each hidden plan, each controlled breath, that I began to prepare for the day when I would never return to that house. I still didn't know how or when, but one certainty grew inside me. If I stayed there, I wouldn't last long. And if no one came to get me, then I would have to do it on my own. Even if I fell along the way, even if the world outside was as harsh as the one inside, because worse than everything they did was the idea of dying without ever having tried to escape. And that idea kept me awake at night. I was 14 when I started to feel that something inside me was changing. It wasn't my body, it wasn't just my thoughts, it was deeper than that. As if a part of me that had been buried began to stir, disturbed by so much silence. And little by little, it began to show on the outside. In the way I walked, in my more direct gaze, in the way I responded with a curt word instead of lowering my head. It was subtle, but enough for my mother to notice. And when she noticed, everything got worse. She said I was becoming cheeky, that girls raised by single mothers end up talking like prostitutes. And she said this without moving a muscle in her face, as if it didn't hurt, as if it wasn't her own daughter standing there in front of her. I continued cleaning, cooking, and taking care of the house as usual. But inside, the rebellion was no longer quiet. And when rebellion begins to walk hand in hand with pain, it's only a matter of time before someone breaks. My brothers noticed. Thomas was the first. One night when my mother had gone out to a church meeting, he came into the room with his usual manner. But something was different. He didn't call me anything. He didn't joke around. He just came straight at me. When he tried to pull me, I pushed him away. It was the first time I reacted. He looked at me as if I had spat in his face. He stood still for a few seconds. Then he hit me. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just slapped me hard, right in the mouth. I fell to the floor with the taste of blood and a new pain. The pain of knowing that if I fought back again, he might kill me. That night, I slept with the door locked from the inside. I dragged the wardrobe against the entrance. I knew it wouldn't do much good, but it was all I had. And for the first time, I dreamed that I hit him back, that I screamed so loud that the whole city could hear me. I woke up with my heart racing and the certainty that I was reaching my limit. From then on, the atmosphere at home changed. Thomas started ignoring me, but it wasn't just any silence. It was a dangerous silence, the kind that hides what's coming next. Bobby became more mocking, saying that now she thinks she's a woman just because she learned to show her teeth. And Mark, he watched more. He hardly said anything, just stood by the doors, with that deep look studying my movements. And that scared me more than anything. I continued hiding coins. The cream jar in the garden was already full, so I started another one inside an old bean can, covering it with dirt and dry leaves night after night. It was a ritual that kept me going. Every penny buried was a little piece of my escape. And when the world inside the house got too tight, I closed my eyes and counted everything I had saved, as if it were my shield against them. My mother didn't help. On the contrary, when she realized I was trying to distance myself from my siblings, she made a point of putting me together with them. Go help Thomas with his clothes. Take Mark's plate. Stay with Bobby. He's sick. I already knew what came after each order. It was a disguised invitation. And when I tried to refuse, she said I was being cruel to my own family, that I was an ungrateful person full of venom. And sometimes, even without meaning to, I started to believe it. One day, I said no. She told me to take a towel to Thomas in the bathroom. I stood still. I said I was busy. She came into the kitchen and with the dishcloth still in her hand, slapped me so hard that I fell down. She yelled that if I wanted to be my own boss, I had to leave that house. And I thought, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I just didn't say it out loud because she wouldn't understand. I started running away more, not from the house. I couldn't do that yet, but from my body, from time. I distracted myself with little tasks I made up just to stay away from them. I washed the yard twice, cleaned the same window for hours. One day, I spent the whole afternoon folding clothes that were already folded. It was either that or collapse, because in there, Collapsing was dangerous. You become an even easier target. The three of them seemed to communicate only with their eyes. When I walked by, they exchanged glances, as if they had plans, and sometimes they did. One night, I woke up to footsteps in the hallway. I thought it was just one person, but there were two. The doorknob turned, but the door didn't open. The closet was stuck. I stood there, sweating cold, listening to the breathing on the other side of the door. After a while they gave up, but that confirmed it for me. They were waiting for me to slip up, and I couldn't slip up. The tension rose to the point where I couldn't eat properly anymore. Every spoonful of food went down with effort. My stomach rejected it, and my mother said I was playing games, that I was trying to get attention. Bobby said that stuck-up girls starved themselves on purpose. Thomas pretended not to see, and Mark laughed in the corner. It was all a game to them, a dirty game where I was the only one bleeding. One hot afternoon, while I was washing the yard, Bobby approached me. He said he was going to help me. He grabbed the hose and started playing with the water. But it wasn't a game. He soaked all my clothes, laughed, and said, "Now I can see better what you've become." I dropped the bucket. I ran to my room. I locked the door and cried until my face hurt. It was more than shame. It was anger. Anger that he thought he had the right, that no one did anything, that everything remained the same. That night, I had a high fever. I was shaking in bed, with the sheets stuck to my body. My mother came in, looked at me, and said it was divine punishment, that rebellious girls get sick. She left the door ajar. I gathered my strength and got up just to lock it again, and as I locked it, I promised myself, either I would leave there soon, or that place would kill me. The coin hidden in the garden became my amulet. Every night before going to sleep, I would go there. I would bury another one. I would talk to the ground. I would whisper, "Not long now, not long now." It was my only real hope, because no one was going to save me. I understood that. Not even God seemed willing. And yet I believed it was still possible, that there was still a place outside that house where I could walk without looking back. When I turned 15, the weight of staying in that house was too much for me to bear. It wasn't just exhaustion anymore, or just fear. It was a kind of stifled despair, the kind that swells up inside you. I would wake up in a panic, sleep with my soul shriveled up, and even when nothing happened, my body would tremble just from the silence, because the silence inside was never a good sign. The days felt like traps. Every corner of the house, every glance, every sentence my mother uttered sounded like a warning. I felt that something worse was brewing, and I was changing too. I no longer had that paralyzing fear I had before. Now it was a different kind of discomfort, sharper, more rebellious. It was as if the pain of keeping quiet had turned into a knife in my chest. It was on a stifling afternoon that everything almost changed. I had spent the whole morning helping my mother with the bedding. She nitpicked everything. She said I was folding them wrong, that the sheet was still damp, that I was doing it on purpose to annoy her. I just bowed my head and redid it, as always. But inside I could only think of one thing. That night I was going out. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was an old plan, cultivated like hope is cultivated. The jar of coins was already heavy. I knew the way to the street where I thought my father lived. I had an approximate address, an old memory, but still vivid. And I knew what time my mother would leave for her vigil at the church. Everything was timed. It was the moment I had been waiting for months. I just needed to muster the courage to get to the door. My backpack was ready. 2 pieces of clothing, the papers with the address written down, some dry food. Nothing more than the bare necessities. I hid everything under the bed, between the loose slats. My plan was to leave through the kitchen window after waiting for the house to quiet down. But not everything went as I had imagined. In the late afternoon, my mother came back from the market angry. She said the cashier's wife was rude, and when she arrived like that, everything became a reason. She told me to clean the front stairs. While I was scrubbing, I heard Bobby commenting to Mark that she's too quiet today. My stomach turned. They were already sensing something, and I hadn't even left the porch yet. I went back to my room before dinner and pretended to have a headache. I said I was going to bed early. My mother grumbled, but let it go. I curled up in bed with my heart racing. waiting for the right moment. The voices in the living room faded. The front door slammed. She had left. I waited a few more minutes. My brother's footsteps also disappeared. Every second was an eternity. I got up slowly, grabbed my backpack, and went to the window. And that's when I heard it. Thomas's voice, low, right behind me. "Where are you going, Wilma?" My body froze. I turned slowly. He was there, in the hallway, leaning against the wall. His eyes were half closed, his smile mocking. I felt my legs give way. I tried to answer, but nothing came out. He entered the room unhurriedly. He took the backpack from my hand. He opened it. He saw everything. The clothes, the paper, the food. "Were you going to run away?" He asked that with the voice of someone who already knew the answer. He looked at me for a few seconds. Then he laughed. "Do you really think you can walk out that door and pretend nothing happened?" I threw my body back when he took a step, but it didn't work. He grabbed my arm and squeezed it hard. "If you leave, the whole town will know what you are. I'll make sure of it." I could only think of one thing: escape. He pushed me onto the bed, but I kicked and pushed him with my elbow. I hit him in the face. I remember that well, because it was the first time I saw blood coming out of Thomas's nose. He staggered, cursed loudly, and I ran. I crossed the hallway with my heart pounding, but before I reached the kitchen door, my mother's voice came from outside. "What's going on in there?" She had come back. I don't know why. Maybe she had forgotten her purse. Maybe it was just bad luck. When she saw me standing there with my backpack in my hand and Thomas coming right behind me, she frowned. She asked, "Where are you going with that look on your face?" And before I could say anything, he answered for me. He said I was stealing food and money, that I was going to run away with some street kid. She believed him right away. She didn't ask for an explanation. She raised her hand and hit me in the face so hard that I fell to the kitchen floor. At that moment, I realized that I would never have a real chance as long as I was there, because there, even my attempt at freedom became a crime. My mother screamed, saying I was a disgrace. Thomas pretended to contain his anger, with blood dripping from his nose and that look of vengeance in his eyes. I was thrown into my room and locked in. I stayed there for 2 days, without food, without proper water. When I knocked on the door, they told me to think. Think about everything I would lose if I insisted on betraying my own home. I sat on the floor, staring at the cracked ceiling, and for the first time, I was sure I was going to die in there. If not by their hands, it would be by her words. On the night of the second day, Mark came in. He said he came to talk. I backed away. He sat on the edge of the bed. He was silent for a while. Then he said that if I promised not to try to escape anymore, he could convince the others to leave me alone. But the condition was clear. I would have to obey. I was speechless. I didn't answer. He got up, touched my hair, and said that it was better this way. He left without doing anything. But the threat was made. It was written in every unspoken word. I slept hugging my backpack, which they had thrown back there, now without food, without paper, without a future. When I woke up, my body ached inside. Shame, helplessness, and anger mixed together. But within that mixture, there was still something burning. The certainty that even after that failed attempt, I would try again. And next time, no one would stop me, because running away was more than a plan. It was a matter of life, and I had already seen up close what it was like to die in silence. After that failure, something in me hardened for good. It was no longer fear, nor that childish hope that I still kept hidden. Now it was something else, a kind of exhaustion filled with rage, as if my body had already understood that there was no point in asking for help or waiting for someone to come and save me. I moved inside like a wounded animal in the dark, trying to climb out of the hole with my own fingernails. My mother spent the next few days pretending that nothing had happened. She walked around the house as if I were just a piece of furniture out of place. She ordered me to wash, cook, sew. She didn't ask any questions. She just gave orders in that empty tone, as if talking to a wall. My brothers, on the other hand, were more attentive. Bobby kept teasing me, as if it were just another funny episode. Thomas looked at me from afar with controlled anger. And Mark, he seemed too calm, like someone waiting for his prey to tire. I started hiding everything again. The few coins I had left, a new piece of paper with the address of the neighborhood where my father might live, and 2 more old shirts that I rolled up tightly to make them look smaller. I hid everything between the mattress lining and a crack in the wall behind the wardrobe. Starting the plan over was like learning to breathe again, but now I knew the next chance couldn't fail. At school, Mrs. Lambert still watched me with those eyes that wanted to ask but already knew the answer. One day, she left a note inside my history book. It said, "If you need me, come find me. I'm listening." I kept it as if it were treasure, not because I thought she could get me out of there, but because it was the first sincere gesture anyone had made toward me in a long time. I didn't have the courage to respond, but now I knew someone saw. At home, I remained silent, but inside my thoughts were screaming. I began to plan each step. I knew it would only work if my mother and the 3 of them were out on the same day, or at least distracted enough not to notice my absence until it was too late. And that seemed impossible, until one morning I heard her talking on the phone about traveling with Thomas to the neighboring town to resolve a problem with her late grandfather's documents. It would take about half a day, but it was already a window of opportunity. Bobby and Mark would stay, but 2 was less than 4. I spent the previous night without sleeping. I had everything ready, my backpack with the little I had left, the hidden coins, and a letter I wrote to leave on the bed. No explanation, just one sentence. "I don't belong to you." That was my goodbye, not to them, but to everything they made me believe. When the car left the garage that morning, I was paralyzed for a few minutes. I didn't know if it was real. I waited another hour, watching from behind the curtain. Bobby went out to ride his bike. Mark was locked in his room listening to loud music. I grabbed my backpack. I left through the back door. The street was empty, and for the first time in years, I felt the wind blow on my face without dirtying me. I walked fast, but without running. I couldn't draw attention to myself. Each step was a mixture of fear and euphoria. I passed Mrs. Jones' house and wondered if she would look out the window. She didn't. I continued to the bus stop. I had enough change to take a bus to the neighborhood where I thought my father lived. In my mind, everything was going to work out. I was going to knock on a door. He was going to recognize me, hug me, and say he had been waiting for me. It was naive, I know, but it was the only story that still kept me going. It took 40 minutes to get there. The neighborhood was different, but the big tree on the corner was still there. So was the smell of motor oil. I walked slowly, looking for the house that lived in my memory. I found one that looked similar. I knocked. A woman opened the door. She had a tired face and hands stained with flour. I asked for him. She said he didn't live there, that the name hadn't lived there for a long time. My heart sank. I tried 3 more houses. Nothing. No one knew him, or they said it had been a long time. I started walking in circles. The coins in my pocket were running out. The sun was already high. My backpack was heavy. I sat on the sidewalk and cried. Not loudly. I just let it flow. I was free, but aimless. Out of the house, but still trapped. That's when I saw a small market on the corner. I went in and asked for a glass of water. The girl at the cash register looked at me strangely. I must have looked like a fugitive. She gave me the glass and asked if I was lost. I shook my head. I couldn't lie. I just said I was looking for someone who might not live there anymore. She offered me a chair. She sat with me. She called me dear. She said I looked scared. And I was, because it was the first time someone had talked to me without wanting anything in return, without ulterior motives. It hurt and comforted me at the same time. When I asked if there was a shelter nearby, she thought about it and said there was a church that helped girls who ran away from home, but it was on the other side of town. I couldn't walk there, and I didn't have any more money for the bus. The woman saw my despair, and she gave me 3 large coins. She said I didn't have to pay her back. Just promise me you'll be okay. I took the address and thanked her, unable to form a complete sentence. I left with wet eyes and a lighter backpack. I took the bus. I got off near an old building with a cross at the entrance. That was it. The reception was simple. A grey-haired man greeted me. He said I could come in, rest, eat, that no one would send me away. I sat on the bench in the reception area and stared at the white wall. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of who would open the door. I didn't expect screams, slaps, or orders. Just silence. And for the first time, the silence wasn't threatening. That night, I slept in a clean bed, with sheets that didn't smell of the past. I woke up scared but realized that no one was watching me. And I cried again. I cried until I fell asleep again. Because there, in that strange and new little corner, for the first time, I felt that maybe, just maybe, I had managed to get out. Still not knowing where to go, but out. And that was already a miracle. Staying in that shelter was like learning to walk again. At first my body didn't believe it. I would enter rooms expecting someone to yell. I would sit down afraid of taking up too much space. I slept curled up, as if I were still between walls that wanted me to be small. But there, no one raised their voice. The nuns spoke softly, walked slowly, offered food as if it were normal, and that scared me more than any punishment I had ever received. The days passed slowly. I watched everything in silence. I wanted to trust, but my mind wouldn't let me. I always waited for the moment when everything would turn into a trap. I thought someone would knock on the door and say I had to go back, but that someone never came. And over time, I began to relax my body, first by sleeping with my legs stretched out, then by eating without rushing, and then finally by asking questions. Sister Judith was the first to realize that I wasn't just another runaway girl. One day, she took me aside and said she saw something strange in my eyes. "You're always ready to run, but you have nowhere to go, right?" I didn't answer, but that phrase stuck with me, and for the first time I felt like telling her. But telling her meant remembering, and remembering still hurt too much. Even so, I started writing everything down. I took an old notebook I found in a drawer and started writing in the middle of the night when everyone was asleep. It wasn't a diary, it was an outlet. I described the faces, the sounds, the smells, everything I had never told anyone. When I finished a page, I cried. And when I cried, I felt less weight on my chest. It was like pulling out tiny splinters from under my skin, one by one. The other girls there had different stories, but similar eyes. There was one who ran away from her stepfather, another from her addicted mother. Some smiled easily, as if forgetting was part of the healing process. I couldn't smile. I didn't even try. But one of them, Laurie, always told me, "When you stop blaming yourself, maybe you'll start breathing right." I listened quietly, but I kept every word. It didn't take long for the social worker to call me. She said they tried to find my father, but couldn't. The information was out of date. There was no one to pick me up. No close relatives, no adoptive family available. She asked if I wanted to be taken in by a temporary home. I hesitated, but anywhere was better than going back. I signed the papers with a trembling hand, but with a steady heart. It was one more step. They sent me to the home of a lady named Helen. Grey hair, always neatly dressed, soft-spoken. She didn't ask any questions. She just said, "Here, you're a guest. When you're ready to talk, I'll listen." That broke me down, because I had never been anyone's guest before. I had always been the nuisance, the inconvenience, the secret the house wanted to hide. Her house smelled of cake and books. In the bedroom, a flowered quilt covered the bed. There were light curtains and a small bookcase with old novels. I slept there the first night with a suspicious body, but I slept, and I dreamed of a long road, endless, just me walking, no one behind me. Time passed slowly at Helen's house. She taught me how to make tea, took me to the market, showed me how to take care of plants. She didn't treat me like a sick person or a victim, just like someone who could learn again. And that gave me a kind of strength I had never felt before, because it wasn't based on fear, it was based on choice. Even so, the pain didn't go away. Some nights I would wake up sweating, with the image of the bedroom door slowly opening. Others, I would remember my mother's cold voice, saying that I would never be anyone. These memories came unbidden, but now I had a way to face them. I wrote. I wrote until my hand hurt, until there was no more space left on the page. One day, Helen found one of the notebooks. She didn't read it. She just returned it with a flower bookmark and said, "Keep going. One day, someone will need these words." That gave me an idea. I started to think that maybe in the future, I could tell my story, not for revenge, but to show that it is possible to get out, that you can keep going, that a wounded body doesn't have to carry everything forever. Meanwhile, the social worker returned. She said my mother had been located and that she didn't want to see me, that she claimed I was rebellious, ungrateful, manipulative. She said this, expecting some reaction, but I just breathed. For the first time, hearing that my mother rejected me didn't hurt. It was liberating, because now I knew it was never my fault. They also said that Bobby had been arrested for attempted robbery. Thomas was still in town, working in a workshop, and Mark, no one knew. He was gone. That made me uneasy, knowing that he was out there somewhere. But I took a deep breath, because now, if he showed up, I had someone who would listen to me, and that changed everything. Little by little, I came to understand that freedom didn't come from leaving the house. It came from letting go of what they had put inside me, and that was harder than any escape. But day after day, the burden lessened, and every time I wrote, every time I talked to Helen or Laurie, I felt my chest expand, as if the air began to fit. I was almost 16, and at that time, I started to think about what I wanted to do. Not just run away, not just survive, but live. For real. I wanted to study. I wanted to understand more about the world. I wanted to have a life where no one told me to shut up, where my body wasn't currency, where my story wasn't shameful. I knew the road was still long, that the scars wouldn't disappear overnight. But now, for the first time, I saw a path, and not just a wall. And that night, when I lay down on Helen's bed, staring at the bright ceiling, I thought, if I've come this far, then I can go further, because I left, and no one will make me go back. Never again. When spring arrived, the sun seemed less aggressive. Or maybe it was my body that, for the first time, wasn't carrying the entire weight of the past. There were still nights of anguish. I still woke up with my heart racing because of a dream or some noise. But it wasn't the same kind of fear anymore. Now it was memory. And memory, over time, learns to stop screaming. I was still living with Helen. I had been there for almost a year. The new school was small, a little cold, but the teachers were fair. No one treated me like I was weird. One of the girls in the class, named Brooke, would strike up a conversation from time to time. I didn't say much, but she didn't give up, until one day she lent me a book of poetry. She said I might like it, and I did. I read it in 3 days. Then I asked for another one. She brought me 2. And so, slowly, without promising anything, we created something that felt like friendship. On Sundays, Helen took me to a used book fair. I chose slowly, as if treading on sacred ground. I read the synopses, analyzed the covers, and for the first time in my life, I had the right to choose. Small things, like which book to take or what to eat for lunch, took on immense value, because before, even that was decided by someone who didn't see me as a person. During one of the sessions with the social worker, she asked if I wanted to file a formal complaint against my mother and brothers. I froze. I had never really thought about it. In my mind, running away had already been punishment enough. But she explained that the process could protect other girls, that if they remained free, they could do it again to others. That hit me like a slow knife, because I knew it was true. I knew what they were capable of. Only now, doing that meant bringing everything to light, telling, recording, formalizing, and I still didn't know if I had the strength. I spent weeks with this hammering inside my head. Every time I remembered the house, the smell of sour food, the slamming doors, the low voices saying that I was good for nothing, I felt my body tremble. But then I remembered Brooke, Helen, the peace I felt on the porch reading, and I thought, they only exist in my life because I escaped, and maybe others need to escape too, and maybe if I speak up, someone will believe them. I went back to the assistant's office. I asked for the forms. I said I wanted to do it my way without pressure. She respected that, and I started writing everything down, with details, with dates, with full names. It took days. I cried. I trembled. I choked up. But I wrote. When I finished, I signed at the bottom with a steady hand, because it was more than a document. It was a part of my life that I was giving back to the world, so that it would not be ignored. Months later, they called me to testify. The courtroom was cold. The judge looked tired. But I spoke. I looked straight ahead the whole time. I didn't tremble. The prosecutor looked at me with respect, and that gave me more courage. On the other side of the room, my mother appeared, eyes downcast, hair tied back haphazardly. She didn't look at me. Thomas had a stern expression. Bobby looked nervous. Mark didn't show up. They said no one could find him. It was expected. When I finished my statement, the silence in the room weighed more than all the words I had said. The judge adjourned the session, and during that break, I sat on the bench in the hallway, hugged my knees, and took a deep breath. Not out of relief, but because I had done it, because I hadn't let it go. A few days later, I got the news. Bobby got 2 years for trespassing and attempted assault based on other subsequent reports. Thomas was prosecuted, but claimed lack of clear evidence and got probation. My mother was summoned to participate in a re-education program and lost official custody of any minors. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing, and just the fact that they had been exposed was already a crack in that respectable family facade. I returned to Helen's house feeling lighter. She welcomed me with tea and silence, as always, as I liked it. I slept the best night of my life, without waking up, without running, without remembering. The following week, I wrote a letter to Mrs. Lambert. I didn't know if she was still teaching, if she still lived in the same city, but I wrote. I thanked her for looking at me when no one else did. I told her that I had managed to get out, and that now I was studying, reading, writing. I didn't ask for a reply. I just wanted her to know. Time passed. I began to think about the future without fear. I wanted to work with something that involved listening. Psychology, perhaps. Or social work. I don't know yet. But I wanted to be close to those who need to be heard. Because I learned the hard way that silence kills. And that sometimes all someone needs is a question asked at the right time. Helen said that my gaze had changed. That now it had firmness, but also tenderness. And I found it funny to hear that. Because inside, there was still a lot of weight. But maybe she saw what I couldn't see yet. So, that late afternoon, I sat on the porch with my blue notebook and started writing a new part of my story, without hiding anything, without embellishment, just the truth, as it was, because if some girl, somewhere, read that and saw a piece of herself there, maybe she would have the courage to tell a story too. And it was at that moment, with pen in hand and the sun slowly setting, that I understood. Surviving was not the end. It was just the beginning. Today, I'm 76 years old, and if you ask me how I got here, the answer cannot be told in a single day, not even in a month. It takes time to talk without hurting, to remember without cutting yourself again. But it is possible, because over the years, we learn to touch our own history without becoming victims or executioners. I am Wilma Grace, born in Springfield, Missouri, and I survived a home where no one saw me as a person. A lot has happened since that courtroom, since the days when I thought breathing freely was a luxury for other people. I worked in a clothing store, then in a small office, and finally in a public library. There, I found my niche. I organized books, guided readers, recommended stories, and between customers, I wrote my own, without pretension, just so I wouldn't forget who I was. I never married. I never wanted to, not out of fear, but by choice. I learned to enjoy being alone. All I needed was a clean room, a closet that smelled of lavender, a table by the window. I didn't need promises, or a new last name. And look, that gave me a peace that many women never find. Helen left 10 years ago. She left me a letter saying that I was her best guest, that she learned more from me than she taught me. I keep that as a medal. Brooke, my school friend, became a literature teacher. We still write to each other, not often, but enough to remember that some people are a safe haven, even after the storm. My mother died without me knowing. I found out by chance when a man from the city hall came to see me about a piece of land forgotten in her name. I didn't go to the funeral. I didn't light a candle. I just sat at home, drank black coffee, and thought that the cycle had closed. She left the same way she lived, dry, without explanation, without apology. But it didn't hurt me, because a long time ago I stopped expecting repentance from someone who never knew how to give love. Thomas disappeared after getting into trouble with another man in the neighboring town. They say he lives around there, changing jobs without putting down roots. Bobby got out of prison and joined a religious community. Some say he became a pastor, others that he just hid behind the Bible. I didn't go after any of them. I didn't even want to know if any of them thought about me, not out of pride, but because I learned that there are people we can only heal by leaving behind. Mark. No one ever saw him again. There was a time when I dreamed of him knocking on my door, asking for forgiveness, saying he was a different man. Then I stopped, because I realized that forgiving doesn't mean taking them back, and that there are things we get over without reconciling. Today, I live alone in a little house at the end of the street, near a small square. I plant cacti, read detective novels, and talk to children riding by on their bikes. They call me Miss Wilma, and I laugh inside, because if they only knew the path I took to be able to laugh. But even after everything, even with the life I've managed to build, I still wonder, how many girls like me are locked up right now, in some room with old carpet, listening to footsteps in the hallway, thinking the whole world has forgotten them? How many think there's no way out, that no one will believe them, that the pain is theirs alone? That's why I'm telling my story now, not to cause a scandal, not to relive it, but to show that it is possible, that even when it seems too late, you can still get out. There is still a bus that will take you far away, a market with a nice girl, a house that smells of a cake and has light curtains. There is still someone willing to listen. And if there isn't, we write. We write until someone reads it. The other day, a young woman approached me at the library. She said she read one of my texts in an online group, that it made her understand that what she was going through wasn't normal, that she started saving coins too, that she was waiting for the right moment. She hugged me and cried, and I cried with her, because there, in that hug, I understood that my old pain was not in vain. It became a bridge, it became a seed, it became a path for another woman. So, if you who have come this far felt something in this story, help me, my dear. Leave your like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel to help this grandmother reach more people. I didn't tell you all this to make a scene or to relive the pain. I did it to help, so that girls like me who are still silent out there can find this story and see that they are not alone, that there is a way out, that there is a path, that there are people willing to listen. Most of the time, a story like this can save someone you can't even imagine.